All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our Empowerment Congress Homelessness Working Group meeting. We shared the agenda in the chat. We're really excited for everybody joining us. So without any further ado, my name is Rhea, and I am one of the co-chairs for the Empowerment Congress Homelessness Working Group, joined by my co-chair, Dr. Maia. So I'm going to pass it on to her.
Good evening, everyone. Wonderful to see the group today. I'm Maia, co-chairing here with Rhea. I think most of you know who I am, so I'll spare you the deep dive of an introduction, but I'll pass it along to the next person that I see on my screen. I think it's Miss Janice Martin, and then she can pass it on to the next person. Just a brief introduction of who you are, what organization you represent. Hi, Janice. Oh, Janice, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. Janice Martin, Ecumenical Liaison for the Empowerment Congress and South LA Clergy for Public Accountability. And I'll pass it on to Alicia Arduna.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Sorry, just in the commute home. I'll be home shortly. My name is Alicia Arduna. I guess officially now representing Days of Dialogue and looking forward to the conversation on our upcoming dialogue series. So thank you, and I will pass it to Brett Louie.
Good evening, everybody. Brett Louie here, also with the Institute for Nonviolence in Los Angeles. Very excited to see you all today and be a part of the discussion. So I will pass it on to Miss Gloria Davis.
Hello, I'm on my iPad. I have another meeting going on. I won't be able to stay on the whole time, but I just wanted to be with you guys this evening and support. I'm Gloria Davis, and I'm the Executive Director for the Girls Club of Los Angeles, and also co-chair for the Empowerment Congress. So welcome, and thank everybody for being here this evening.
Wonderful to have you, Gloria. I'll pass it over to Pastor Michael Willis.
Yeah, I'm Pastor Michael Willis with, my phone on mute? Okay.
We can hear you.
Michael Willis with Soul Enrichment Ministries. Just glad to be a part. I'll pass it over to Sirwa Janama.
Thank you, Pastor Willis.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Sarah Janama. I'm with Feed Somebody. Out of Los Angeles, but I'm in Georgia. We have a chapter we're just starting here as well.
Wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
Pass it on to Miss Carmen Taylor-Jones.
Hello there, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just coming on, so I assume we're just introducing ourselves. I'm Carmen Taylor-Jones. I've been traveling around in this community for a minute now, and I have been working in homelessness for quite some time now, and I probably have met many of you, but it's good to be here with you this evening.
Thank you for joining us. I will pass it over to Mary Jo.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mary Jones, retired city employee. Good to be here.
Great to have you here. Miss Jacqueline Ama.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jackie Ama, and I'm just a concerned citizen.
Welcome. Welcome, and feel free to share your concerns here. This is a safe space. Miss Kat Clark Perkins.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kat Clark Perkins, and I'm the outreach coordinator for Timeless Group in LA, California. Thank you for having me in the space.
Thank you for being here. And I believe Miss Reba Stevens.
Good evening, everyone. Reba Stevens, community advocate. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Last but not least, Maia.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maia Ferdman. I am a consultant in intergroup relations, and I'll introduce myself properly in a little bit, but it's very good to be with you. And I'm not sure if we met, is it Latanya?
No, you're absolutely right. I just got a message. You know, it's because Latanya, I see you all the time, and I in my head I said hello. Please introduce yourself.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Latanya Green, and I have a nonprofit geared towards assisting the homeless. It's called Unfamiliar Blessings, Inc. I am so excited to be a part of this group.
Thank you for always your consistent presence. We really appreciate it. I'll pass it over to Rhea. Oh, Stephen, did you introduce yourself?
No, he did not.
I'm not doing a good job of keeping track of the squares today. Stephen Bledsoe, feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to the group.
Maybe Stephen stepped away for a moment.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Sure.
You know what, since this is my first time here, I will add that I am, I've got a lot of formers. I'm the former chief district director for the 37th congressional district prior to the 2010 census. I'm also the homeless count coordinator for SPA 6 for 2013 and 15, appointed to the LO Continuum of Care Board in 2016, SPA 6 coordinating council, and a couple other board assignments. So there, just give you a little.
Well, we appreciate that expertise that you're going to bring to this group. Thank you for sharing. Stephen might have still stepped away, but it looks like Sandy Cook just joined.
Sandy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and forgive my camera this evening. I'm not presentable. But what are we introducing ourselves?
Yeah, just a quick introduction of who you are, what organizations you represent.
Okay, so I work with a lot of community organizations, but one that I'm working with closely with is SCLC of Southern California. I've also done some work in the community with our unhoused neighbors, organizing faith-based community to do work inside their congregations. So community organizer, glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. Again, welcome everyone. Look forward to a great conversation tonight. I'm gonna pass it over to Rhea for a recap.
So again, thank you to everybody who is returning and joining us, and thank you to all the new people joining us. We're excited to have you here. We've been meeting every 2 weeks, and as you know, our main focus is our Empowerment Congress Homelessness Bridge Street Building Outreach model. And so with that, last meeting we kind of did a deeper dive into understanding what bridge building is. We shared about a guest that we're very excited to have this evening, a bridge building expert, Miss Maia Ferdman. And then we also, looked at this video, A Place Built on Dreams, to understand the continued need for homeless outreach and efforts that support that. We also, had some interesting policy updates that we shared, and did a little bit of a recap on our Days of Dialogue timeline and implementation. So with that, I'm going to kick it back to SMA for some policy updates.
Yeah, I'm going to keep the policy updates brief today. In the chat, you all have access to the agenda, and in it, there are 3 articles highlighting a variety of issues around homelessness. The first is an article that showcases a study about how homeless prevention actually works. The second article highlights the encampment crisis around RVs across the city and county. Our political leadership acknowledges this at a county level and at a city level. Lots of folks are talking about different types of solutions. This is an important article for all of us to sort of check out as we start to talk about what targeted areas we want our bridge building initiative to focus on. The third article highlights the issue of substance use disorder amongst our unsheltered neighbors, and the use of different methods to try to prevent overdoses on the street. And then last but not least, going to give a plug to Praxis MRT's briefing of all of the issues facing Angelenos. If Janice Martin would like to give a brief update, well, I'll open it up to her if she wants to add any updates around Praxis, but just want to make sure that the group knows how to subscribe to it so they get the articles regularly. Janice,
No
did you have
real
anything?
No real updates, Estimate. I will say that they can look forward to seeing it in their email boxes tomorrow morning.
Wonderful. Thanks, Janice.
Thank
Any
you.
I always feel like we're talking at folks, but any questions, comments, concerns around the policy update? Please feel free to throw them in the chat or speak them out loud. Okay, I'll pass it back to Rhea for the next part.
Thank you. Well, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Maia Ferdman. She's going to share a little bit more about bridge building and understanding bridge building. So Maia, thank you for joining us and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rhea. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you, MRT, Estimate, Rhea. I'm really, really glad to be with you tonight. As I said earlier, my name is Maia Ferdman. I am a consultant in intergroup relations, which means that I do a range of engagements, programming, strategy related to interfaith work, race relations work, policing and community work, any essentially work that has to do with bringing people together across lines of difference. I do this work both in for government and nonprofit organizations, and I also do this work sort of supporting other bridge building organizations with strategic support and development support. And so I'll get into in a second what bridge building is, but I wanted to give that as a context for who I am. I also, on the other part of my time, help manage a research initiative at UCLA to study hate. It's called the Initiative to Study Hate at UCLA, which we're very excited about. And a few years back, I used to work for the city of Los Angeles. So I too am a former city employee. I worked for the Human Relations Commission, which is tasked for bringing positive intergroup relations to the city. So that was my previous life before UCLA and consulting. So I'm here to give a little bit of an overview of what we mean when we say bridge building, this sort of nebulous term that we can put into, put so many different ideas onto it. And to give some context for the work that we did about a year back with Council District 10 and the council member, around ways we can utilize bridge building in the homelessness landscape, which some of you may have been familiar with. I see Reba there. It's so good to see you again, for example. And hopefully that will give you a little bit more of a context and a basis from which to further your discussions around the strategy that you're developing. So I'll give some context and then we'll just open it up for questions and conversation. Sound good? Sweet. Okay. Well, without further ado, what is bridge building? What do we mean by this concept of bridge building? Now, I'm going to use a definition that I developed with some partners who are also leaders in this field, this budding field. The way that I think about what bridge building is a family of skills, approaches, and frameworks that altogether aim to increase our individual and collective capacity to resolve conflict, work across lines of difference, and lead empathically and effectively. So it's not one thing. When I talk about bridge building, I really mean a way of thinking. It's similar to saying when I talk about democracy and democratic principles, that means a lot of different kinds of things. But at its core, what bridge building requires is that second piece, that capacity, the goal or the function of bridge building is to work across some kind of difference, whether that's a conflict, whether that's bringing people together across difference, or whether it's developing a sense of empathy. And I'll say that you can build bridges for many different reasons, right? The metaphor, I think, is really apt of building a bridge. Because you can build a bridge to many ends. It's really, I see this as a tool, not an end in and of itself. So we can, for example, build bridges toward more cohesive communities. We can build bridges toward more effective governance structures. We can build bridges toward more effective classrooms. That's sort of we can have different goals, essentially. We can build bridges in service of a particular policy goal, right? So there's many different goals that we can have and still build bridges as one sort of function towards that. So it can feel kind of theoretical, but I think it's important to say that this is broadly applicable. And so to delve into that first part, the family of skills, approaches, and frameworks, I think this is what's going to illustrate this concept a little bit more concretely. Bridge building, when I talk about a family, these are just some examples of bridge building. For example, inclusive processes for political participation. So this might be, if you've heard of the concept of deliberative democracy, the idea of not just a town hall, but how do you create policies incorporating many different kinds of opinions and approaches and participants. Promoting democratic norms, things like pluralism, things like participation, things like outreach, grassroots community outreach. Mediating conflicts. This is where we get even more concrete. Bridge builders really do, mediators are one kind of bridge builder. I would say that all mediators are bridge builders in some form because you are really acting as a bridge between two parties in a conflict. Dialogue facilitators are those who are building bridges of communication in a group context. Fostering positive intergroup relations, folks who bring people together across lines of difference for different ends, right? Interfaith leaders, for example. Coalitions. Many of you, if not all of you, have probably built a coalition in some form or fashion, which necessarily involves bringing people together across differences in service of a greater goal, which requires certain skill sets, a certain mentality, a certain positionality toward bridge building. Deliberative decision-making. So this is also this sense of coming to decisions, whether that's in a policy context or an organizational context, with some kind of deliberative piece or element, a piece that involves many voices and turning those many voices into a move forward. So these are just some examples to help illustrate the different kinds of skills, approaches, and frameworks involved in what we mean when we say bridge building. So what does this have to do with homelessness and why we're here today? So a little bit of context. So about, gosh, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now, which is absolutely wild. Councilmember Mark Goodley Thomas approached me and my colleague Shafin Roberts to talk to us about a conflict at an encampment at 6th and Berendo. This was a really heightened situation with a lot of different stakeholders that were involved, and just a high conflict scenario. And we went in, first, what we did was hold a facilitated conversation between many different stakeholders who all had something to say about what was going on at that encampment. That included people who lived there, that included the neighbors of the encampment, that included policymakers, it included the service providers. And we realized that in the course of that conversation, that there was a lot more conflict and a lot more deep-seated issues that we needed to uncover in order to really see how we could be most helpful. And so we sort of shifted gears and we went on to do a very intensive and longer-term discovery process to understand with the key question of how can we best use this family of skills and approaches, these bridge building skills, to support and to address, not to support the homelessness crisis, to address the homelessness crisis and to support those working on homelessness in Los Angeles. And so what we did was hold a series of listening sessions with different stakeholders, faith leaders, people with lived expertise and experience of homelessness, service providers, city and county employees of different kinds, people from particular offices, from the mayor's office, from the county, from the LAPD, and more, all with the intention of understanding where are the gaps? What are you struggling with? What is it that's stopping you from success? And what would it look like if we reimagined some of these gaps in communication? And so this is what we found. I'll go into a little bit of our findings, but I'll also drop a link into the chat of our report so that you can read in more detail if you're curious. We found jurisdictional challenges, a sense of tensions between the different actors. There's all the hands in the pot, you know, there's city, county actors, there's service providers, there's faith leaders, a lack of clarity around roles, a lack of accountability, a lack of alignment, everything that has to do with jurisdiction. We had communication and coordination challenges. We found a need for a robust approach to collaboration, but a lack thereof, a lack of information sharing, fighting, you know, misunderstanding of existing information, not just when there was information being shared, there was a misunderstanding of that information. And so we saw all of these pitfalls in communication. We found relational and trust building challenges. You know, a lot of people cited a lack of empathy and humanity for folks experiencing homelessness. We found a lot of broken trust, both between broken trust of people experiencing homelessness. Their trust was broken with service providers and with others, and a lot of broken trust between the same stakeholders and leaders working within the system who didn't trust each other and could no longer work together. On the other hand, we also asked about successes, and we learned about success related to coordination and communication, examples of clear delineation of roles and responsibilities, examples of clear alignment and strong relationships between leaders, examples of better access to information as a result of engaging deeply with community. And we also found successes related to taking a human-centered approach to homelessness. The idea of using empathy, of really leaning into empathy, humanity, care, and love when dealing with people experiencing homelessness, of leaning on trusted messengers, trusted community messengers when dealing with homelessness. So I'm going to drop that into the chat just in case you are curious. You can read, there's a lot more to that, but these are some of the outcomes of the conversation, which it sounds like many of you have a lot of deep experience working in the world of homelessness. And so a lot of this probably isn't news to you. It's probably very familiar. But when we were listening for this, we wanted to take a slightly different tack and say, okay, these are our challenges. Now, where can bridge building, these family of skills and frameworks and approaches that we talked about earlier, help? Where can we infuse some of the approach to homelessness with bridge building? And so this is what we recommended and what we talked about in our report. First was a recommendation to foster a culture shift among leaders by building relationships, trust, and opportunities to troubleshoot. We suggested building curated conversations between leaders and practitioners, as well as specific facilitated conversations around particular issues that they were finding. So using the skill of bridge building, the facilitation skills, to bring people together across those lines of difference, to actively work through some of the hiccups and the pitfalls that we were seeing delineated in our focus groups. Next was building the city's capacity and muscle for bridge building. It's a skill set. this is a very concrete skill set. If you've ever been in a mediation session or seen a facilitator at work, you know that there's a particular skill set involved in being able to hold these kinds of difficult conversations. And so this does require some investment in training and capacity building, both in terms of building the same way you have sort of the muscle of the police force, right? You need a muscle of facilitators or mediators, the frontliners, right? Who have the capacity to, and the skill set and the knowledge and the know-how to be able to confront differences as they arise. And so that was our second recommendation, was a set of training for stakeholders, both for facilitators and mediators, and for stakeholders themselves to have some skills in working across lines of difference, even if their primary role isn't mediation or facilitation. And then finally, our last recommendation was to create a hub or a structure for centralized coordination, problem solving, and conflict resolution. This is, you know, again, I don't need to tell you about how really at the core of our challenges with homelessness are so structural. And so likewise, having some piecemeal sort of ad hoc facilitation is good, but not as extensive as necessary to create the kind of change that is required. And so we suggested creating a sort of this structure for on-call bridge builders who have the familiarity with the homelessness landscape and the clarity of their role to be able to come in and help address some of the communication pitfalls, to help address some of the trust issues, for example, and a centralized office for coordination so that we don't replicate some of the lack of coordination that we saw in the focus groups. So that's a summary of the work that we did together with the council member and with the different stakeholders of CD10, although our focus groups really extended well beyond CD10 and throughout the city. I'll say that Empowerment Congress really has taken on the mantle of this strategy. And I would encourage you to think, as you move forward, to think about the strategy, to sort of think in two ways that I think would be helpful. One is to think, where are the gaps that you're seeing, the communication gaps, the coordination gaps, the trust and relational gaps that you think bridge building tools and strategies would be useful to address. I'm not gonna, you know, I resist the urge to think that bridge building can solve everything. You know, there's that metaphor of if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I fight against myself sometimes because I'm such a bridge building advocate that I think that bridge building can be the end all be all for everything. I don't think that's actually the case. I do think there's certain things that are better, you know, served in other ways, but I think bridge building is so underutilized as a resource, as a strategy. And so it will be helpful to think about those particular gaps through the lens of bridge building. And then on the other hand, where is the culture shift? What are the skills needed? And what are the structures needed to advance this kind of bridge building skill set, bridge building approach and framework as one other innovative way to address the homelessness crisis that's really missing, I think, from the conversation. So that's what I've got for you. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, either about bridge building in general as a concept or about the work that we did with CD10, the report we wrote, or anything else. And thank you.
Thank you. I joined late. Was the last name Ferdman? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How are you? I'm Pastor Lewis, New Antioch Church, 79th in Vermont. And first, let me applaud what I've heard. This is my first exposure to bridge building. And so I love what we're hearing. My question was, what we're talking about or what you just shared with us, is it still in the embryo stages or has it been going on for a while? And if so, can you share some successes that bridge building has had?
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Pastor Lewis. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm glad that you like what you hear. What I'll say, the initiative or the thing that I was involved with was a discovery process. And so the report that I put into the chat is really the outcome of that process. And I know that since then, Rhea and folks here at Empowerment Congress have taken it from there. So I don't know, Rhea, if you want to address what work has been done since then.
Sure. Well, first off, Maya, thank you so much for your presentation. It's always a pleasure to hear about bridge building from you, so thanks. I feel reinvigorated and learn something new every time. And Pastor Lewis, thank you for joining us to answer your question. So as the Empowerment Congress Homelessness Working Group, we've really taken what Maya, Supervisor MRT, and the group piloted in 2022, and we're kind of running with it to develop a bridge building, street engagement, homeless outreach strategy. And that's the focus of our working group. And so we are in the development stages of this outreach strategy. And every meeting, we kind of share more about the strategy. Just a quick recap of what we'd like to see it evolve into is we want to train, we're developing a facilitator training, and we'd like to train facilitators to become, expert bridge builders in homeless outreach. Then we will invite other people to volunteer and learn the facilitator training, go through the training, and then they'll be paired with partnering organizations to work with their outreach teams and implement bridge building within their outreach teams. So that's a quick snapshot, and we're happy to share more. I'll drop my email in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Grace had a question for Maya.
Yes, thank you very much. And I apologize for the background noise. I'm leaving work. I just had a quick question about the role of like data analytics and understanding sort of in your bridge building, how you hope to combine the different qualitative or quantitative approaches to inform policymaking, if any.
Really excellent question. I think that there is absolutely a place for data analytics. I think like anything else, it depends on the context. Whenever I design an engagement, I do so really based on what is needed in that particular context. So in this context, in this process that we did with CD10, we tried to keep it relatively small. We did something between 10 to 13 listening sessions. I can't believe I don't remember it off the top of my head. And we analyzed the data manually to come up with those themes because we didn't have, a huge amount. That said, there's other approaches I've seen, for example, in certain deliberative processes, surveys that then analyze large amounts of data, or I've seen algorithms being used to pair people. Like, for example, this is not related to our work here, but this is an example of how certain bridge builders use data analytics. Or it's not quite data analytics, it's AI. It's hard to keep it straight these days. There's an effort called America Speaks, for example. That was an effort last year to help promote conversations across lines of political difference in the country. And so participants answered a series of political questions, and then based on an algorithm, were paired with somebody in the country who answered those questions very differently. And then they were given an opportunity to have a face-to-face conversation with some prompts and some instructions. And so this was, I'm not sure if, Grace, if that gets to your question or not, but I just wanted to give one example of how technology can be utilized in service of building bridges. Does that sort of address what you're getting at?
Yes, it does. I'm asking because I sort of have, with my background, kind of looked into looking at qualitative approaches to inform quantitative data mechanisms to kind of drive that policy forum. And so I think that this is a great initiative for that. And I think there's a lot of value in what you're doing to drive that analytics AI approach on how we can address this issue. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd be curious to learn more sometime. Other questions? Yes, Princess.
Hi, everybody. My name is Princess Obieno, and I know a lot has been done towards recycling some of the abandoned properties or empty lands in building low-income houses. In continuing the work that you're doing towards the bridge building, is there any way that politicians can be involved in getting more of those lands in order to build more low-income houses, low-income and affordable houses? Because if we have that, I think that will also help homelessness.
Really, really important question. Thank you. I'll say two things about this. One, in the report, we have a section in the appendix, and we debated about whether to include it in the appendix or not. One of the main things that we heard was build more affordable housing, build more housing, and some of the challenges to getting that done. The reason we included it in the appendix is not because it's not important, because I think, to your point, it is central and fundamental, but because I'm not sure. This is one challenge where, honestly, the jury's out on my end on whether bridge building is the right or best method to address that challenge. I don't know, and this is where I don't want to, treat that challenge like a nail just because I have a hammer. I think that it's absolutely essential to build affordable housing. And I don't know where bridge building, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some of you are experts in this and probably know better than I do ways that could be incorporated, but I'm not sure. I will say that I do think in any strategy, it is essential to involve leaders and political leaders. I don't think that it's the end all be all, but I do think that it is necessary to involve leadership, because if you don't, then you have a lot of conversations happening amongst community members, but then no avenue to communicate to the politician or to the decision maker. And so I do think that some level of participation by decision makers is important. Does that answer your question? To some, it's maybe a
Yes, thank you. And the reason why I asked that is when you mentioned about the politicians, when they say that it's not under their jurisdiction. So they can work together. If it's not under their jurisdiction, they can work together and make it happen.
Beautiful. That is definitely a more bridge building approach. Absolutely.
Thank you. By the way.
Thank you. Any other questions about the sort of concept of bridging in general? I will say one more thing about it. There is a growing movement in the United States around this idea of bridge building. It feels really nebulous as a topic and as a concept sometimes, but once you start to see examples of it, it becomes clearer and clearer. I think a lot of the time at the national level, it's mostly used in the context of bridging the red-blue divide, Republicans and Democrats. But folks who are involved in interfaith work understand what bridge building is and have seen it, firsthand for decades. Folks who are involved in building democratic pluralism know what it looks like. I think that it's really bold to think about what it might look like with a particular policy end, which is to help end homelessness and to help address the homelessness crisis. I think that is what's sort of new and missing, and maybe what makes it feel theoretical, because we haven't seen something like that in sort of an intentional, targeted way.
Ms. Ferdman, if I can ask one more question.
Please.
While the bridge building is still in the developmental stages. And again, it sounds wonderful. And I'm sure other faith leaders have, we've tried to do our own bridge building. And we haven't been very successful in many cases. And we have run into the same challenge that you talked about in the focus groups with the jurisdictional challenge. And do you have any advice or suggestions on what we could do? Because in my particular specific situation, as I've tried to do some bridge building with some homeless folks that surround my church, when I've needed help, it hasn't been there. And I think I've called everyone. And so do you have any suggestions as to what we can do while the bridge building is being developed?
Yeah. Certainly, I hear there's sort of an urgency in your question, Pastor Lewis, because it's you're saying, like, how can we help address the very real and present crisis before we have the structures in place, basically, to do so.
Yes.
And I wish I had a better answer. I wish I did. That was something that we were really, when we were going through this discovery process, my colleague Shafin and I were thinking, gosh, like going through, I've done a lot of dialogue, for example, around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right? I've managed a lot of conversations on that topic. This felt like that. Like it was shocking to me how entrenched and how extensive and how complicated and how urgent, like life and death, the crisis is. It's not a theoretical crisis. And so we were banging our heads against the wall thinking, how are we going to suggest building something from scratch or something new when the crisis is so urgent and so pressing? The best answer I can give you is to do two things at once, which is build the plane as you fly it. Just get started. And I think that's what I think Rhea will say more about the days of dialogue and some of the other work that you've already gotten started. To try to have an eye toward structural, to make things more systemic and structural. So rather than creating one-off engagements, see where can you build with an eye toward systemic, like baking this into the system, basically baking this approach into the system, and keep doing what you're doing. Unfortunately, I wish I had more to say.
No, I completely understand, and I took a chance there because I know that I'm entering a area that's not really what you're dealing with. But again, as it relates to the jurisdictional challenges, you have no suggestions. And if you don't, I'm okay. It's just that I think most of us on this call, that's where we're having a challenge, is we don't know where to turn. While bridge building is being developed, we don't know where to turn.
Well, I'll say one more thing about the jurisdictional challenges that is not going to be satisfying. I'll just preface it there. It's not going to be satisfying, nor is it going to be enough. But one thing that I was shocked by was how little some of the folks, the different stakeholders, some, not all, some of the stakeholders knew about the other stakeholders' roles. And so there was a lot of talk about the jurisdictional delineation and challenges, but not a lot of knowledge about what the jurisdictions actually are. Who are the players involved at every level? Who are the actual people involved at every level? Not just the organizations, but the people. So one thing I might suggest is also understanding, like for this one encampment, who are all the layers, and not exhausting any sort of knowledge, or trying to exhaust the list of who is every single person, what is every single organization that touches this street corner, for example, and really getting to know every one of them and what they do and where they sit in sort of the legal milieu. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
I think if I may add to that, I think Maia, your response was spot on. And, Pastor Lewis, what we're hoping is why bridge building is especially keen to addressing this issue and moral crisis is because it raises awareness. So part of the bridge that is built is that we meet neighbors who may be outside of our jurisdiction, but are still involved in this space of wanting to address homelessness. And so that's one of the goals of this strategy, is that we hope that by building bridges, we build bridges throughout the community. So instead of operating sometimes in silos, we operate as teams.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know what? I have to jump in. I'm sorry. I know I've been away from the table for maybe a year or two, but I've been still living in the community, driving down the street, and I remember the work. Are we? And I don't know, but this conversation seems like a little elementary. Aren't we beyond this? I really thought that, you know, when I was the homeless count coordinator, we knew who all the parties were. It's only so many parties. And we knew who all of those people and all of those agencies were. Now, the problem was movement. And that became that, you know, it was a lot of different reasons. And I think that some people just didn't know what to do. But I think that we have been doing this long enough where there are people at the table who know how to move things forward. And I didn't think still that jurisdiction was that much of an issue. Is it still? I mean, is jurisdiction, so nobody knows what their role is? Is that what we're saying? And they are not willing to work together? Is that? Bring me up to speed. What? Because I'm.
So
this is,
go ahead.
it's a little disheartening, because as we have seen the crisis continue to develop into this human tragedy, we've been at the table for a minute now, and there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money at the table. So I'm not sure what is the real issue in moving things forward and getting things done. I'm missing something, I guess.
I think it's multifaceted, Carmen. I think you raised a great point. And to your point, we also feel like bridge building, one, it's an innovative application. However, as Maya mentioned, it's something that a lot of us probably practice on the regular. It's not only about the electeds involved, but just community members. Sometimes there's a lack of awareness and a lack of, you know, people working in the space, and electeds may know what's going on within the space of homelessness, but not all neighbors are as familiar or don't know where to turn for information. So, for example, as Pastor Lewis is kind of raising some questions and concerns, it's just that access to information is there's not as much of an ease. And as we are addressing the crisis also continues to grow, if that makes sense. I know Reba's had her hand up for a while too, so I want to make sure we get to her question, but
yeah, I just wanted to jump in and wrap my arms around Pastor Lewis, who has a desire to understand better and of what to do and where to go. And I think that this is a great opportunity for us to, if you could leave your information so that we can introduce you to the homeless, SPA 6 Homeless Coalition meeting. And then in reference to what was stated earlier, I think it's really important to understand that what I understand is that we're here to, to problem solve, to create something that's fresh and new, that will be created with us, for us, by us, and in order to actually know what to do and partnership with others. And so this is something that we are here to create. And yes, there are tons of resources out there, and there are many people at tables, but this is something that we're being very creative and innovative. And this is why I'm here in this moment. So I want us to lose sight as to why we're here and what we're here to learn and to do. And so I think that it would be helpful if we could create some other opportunities for folks so that they are aware of, as an example, our SPA 6 Homeless Coalition meeting and other meetings in which they can attend in order to raise some of the concerns that they have while we are building here.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you, Reba. Princess Obiano, did you have another question?
My little comment about what Pastor Louis said about how the pastors can work together in moving whatever we're discussing forward. I thought that communication, may one of the pastors can take it upon himself to talk to the rest of the pastors by communicating with them via email or visiting them, telling them this is what is on the table, this is what we're planning to do, how can we do this together, and so on, or by planning an evening with other pastors and then they gather together and have a talk. I think that may be a good approach to start working together, but for the pastors to work together, all other groups that need to be involved, sending emails, reaching out to them, and then maybe a little gathering where they can sit on one table and discuss.
May I respond to that?
Sure.
I think the pastors would love to do that. I've been communicating with a group of pastors in my area, as long as the meetings are productive and it's not just a venting session, because that is what has happened in the past. We get together, we vent, we share our experiences, and it really doesn't go anywhere. And so just to add some context to what I had mentioned earlier about the jurisdictional challenges, with the encampments that I'm experiencing around my church, I've been passed to, I think, 5 departments. And literally no one is accepting responsibility. Everyone is just saying, it's not my problem, call this person. And so anything we could do to point me in the right direction, I'm willing to do the work. I just literally don't know where to go.
Pastor Lewis, has one of the agencies that you've been passed to HCD? Have you spoken with anybody at HCD? Not that you should have to, because again, forgive me, but there's a strategic plan for homelessness.
Okay.
Are the churches, which prior to like 2011, there was a report that said that 65% of the advocacy work and remediation work with those that were experiencing homelessness at that point was done by the churches. We've always had the churches have been feeding people, attempting to house people, clothing forever. That's what churches do. So when we did this strategic plan, was there a part in there for faith-based? And are we trying to create another plan? Are we trying to move that plan forward?
I'm not familiar with the plan. I've never seen the plan that you're referring to.
So maybe that last part is for the working group. That strategic plan, are we trying to create another plan or other plans? Are we really buying in and really trying to really move the plan that we have adopted further?
So I'd like to point out, this is a beautiful example of bridge building. So I hope, Maia, we're putting what you shared with us to use. 2, we're focusing more on the bridge building strategy, Carmen, but I would love to suggest, Carmen, if you have that plan, if you'd like to share it with Pastor Lewis, that would be great. And then I'd also like to redirect us back to any questions for Maia. You may not know, she's in a time zone a little bit ahead of us, so I would like to respect how much later it is for her. So does anybody have any additional questions for Maia in regards to bridge building? And this conversation has been great, so thank you all for your eagerness and participation.
Freya, this is Mary Jones. I don't have a question for Maia, but in terms of the pastor, I would, it sounds pretty urgent in terms of him getting some support. I would simply suggest that he call his council member's office and see if they can put him in touch with Hopics and have their street team to come out and see how they can support him and assist the unhoused around his church, if there's any resources that they can bring to bear. Like someone said, there's plenty of resources there, We just need to know where to go, but I would start by going to Councilmember Marquise Harris Dawson's office.
Sure.
And ask and have them to connect him to the Hopics team, homeless team.
Thank you.
You have their number, sir?
Yes, I believe me, I have Councilman Dawson's number, but thank you so much. I have not ever asked him about Hopics, and so I will.
About
Thank
Hopics,
you.
and if they can set up a meeting between his office and Hopics to meet out at your location and see how they can assist you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Also, you can benchmark with other churches too, like my church, First Amy, they have homeless ministry.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Pastor Lewis, we hope at our next meeting, you'll be telling us some great news about how a lot of people came to support.
That would be wonderful. And I thank for all the feedback. Thank you so much. I did not know this group existed. And so I'm hoping that I can be a part of this group.
Oh, absolutely. And if there are any additional resources, we'll be happy to provide additional ones too.
Thank you.
I'll say, and Rhea, I'll just say a final word about just based on Pastor Lewis, what just happened. I think that this is an example of where coordination hubs of just community members who are involved. Some have really deep government knowledge, some have really deep community knowledge, some have deep knowledge of faith communities and their resources, can have those sort of ongoing touch points to do exactly what you just did. And hopefully you can be resources to Pastor Lewis and to each other. And so I just want to plant that seed as well, and as sort of an observation. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Maia. Does anybody have any additional questions for Maia?
I'll drop my email.
I would just like to say thank you, Maia. It's great to see you again. Great presentation as always, and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Reba. It is such a joy to see you again. I can't even say. I'm so glad. Thank you. I dropped my email in the chat in case, and my website in case any of you have any follow-up, but thank you all for just the deep work that you do in the community and for your leadership. It really is an honor to be contributing in some small way.
We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us and for your presentation. We hope to see you again soon. So, with that, Esme and I at the last meeting, Esme brought up a really great question about when we apply bridge building areas to targeted areas. So Esme, would you like to share it? You articulated it way better than I just did, but the question that you had for our group, the homework at our last meeting.
For those of you that attended the last meeting, we were having this conversation of which subset of people experiencing homelessness do we want to pilot this bridge building technique on, or skill set on? We've mentioned subpopulations like people living in the RV encampments. Another subset could be by age group. Another subset could be by, me as a physician, medical condition or behavioral health condition. And so sort of gave you guys that were on last time some homework to shout out which sort of subpopulations you think we should target first. And so I want to open it up to you all to hear what your thoughts were about who is of interest right now. It sounds like around some of our faith-based organizations, there are some encampments that could potentially be a place that we start. I'm going to be quiet now and let you all talk.
And Pastor Lewis, if you'd like to share the area that you were speaking about, we're happy to add that to the list as well.
Oh, beautiful. I was trying not to dominate the conversation, but since you asked, there on Vermont, and I won't even be selfish. There's an area on Vermont that's worse than 79, in between 92nd and 90.
Manchester.
Yes. Well, I'll just say on Vermont, between Florence and
Come on now.
Century, yes, is a disaster. It's a
That part.
disaster.
That part.
Vermont between Florence and Century Avenue is, if we could consider adding that stretch to the group, I think if you take a look at it, you may agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
Particularly, they were having a problem at the church, Gethsemane Church on 93rd in Vermont,
Yes, sir.
9300 South Vermont.
Yes, sir.
Gethsemane Church.
So
You can go all the way down of Vermont, all the way down to Rosecrans and Alondra, and it's still the same. Vermont has a major crisis from almost the entirety, but of course, we want to limit our scope, but anywhere from 190th all the way down to Adams, Vermont has major issues.
Yes.
Vermont is one of the thoroughfares that has always been targeted.
are there populations that we want to target? So the tricky thing with geographical locations is we will run into jurisdictional issues. And one of the bridge building techniques we should deploy is really asking folks that live in these encampments, why is it that you chose this space? In my efforts with encampment resolution, what we've learned is, our neighbors are being thoughtful about where they choose to set up tents. Sometimes it's because of the resources that are available in that area, whether it's nearby water supply or food. And sometimes it sits on a piece of land where nobody will bother them, whether it's the police or it sits between city and county. So it'll be tough for anybody to try to resolve it because they have to reach out to different stakeholders. So one of the pieces to this is actually talking to those residents to figure out, why is it that you chose this place and what can we do to figure out some alternative solutions for you. But again, I'm talking too much. What other populations are folks interested in?
And our locations.
What was that, Mary?
I was saying, and our locations. I think we should consider numerous locations and population.
Absolutely.
After giving the homework our last session, I had thought that the RVs would be a good place to start, having seen so many of them burned up on the side of the road. I mean, it seemed like it's happening more frequently. But then I did see Hopics driving around to some of those RVs. So my thought was maybe it's better to see what other groups are targeting, certain places or populations, and then whatever is not being served, then we'll have a better place to start. Hadn't thought about the church community because that was the first time I'd heard that.
So one thing regarding the RVs is that, and I guess maybe this is an example of bridge building, because HCD actually they are the agency that is supposed to manage the RVs. And I know of the issue, it's been in the news, where they actually have closed this year. 3 RV parks have closed already, and this is just now August. And then there are the other RV parks. I know the one out in Cali Lake that they refused to give this gentleman conditional use permit and made him remove half of the RVs that were there, as well as the same as they did at the other people, and they put them all back on the street. So the left hand and the right hand, it's like, okay, are we really, are we working together? Or what are we doing here? Because if we're trying to move them out, we know we have over 8,000 RVs on the street right now, but you're still putting more people on the street, moving them from facilities where they have access to running water, where they have access to septics and, being able to flush your toilets and what have you. So we put them back on the street. And I just, you know, it has to make sense, you know, and that is, I guess maybe that's going to be a part of the bridge building, I guess, I hope, but it's just kind of hard to wrap your mind around. You know, it seems like we're, I don't know. I'll stop talking, but I understand.
Yes, this is the part where you, of the flying the plane and building it at the same time. The thought was, I know that the RV parks, they're closing. We may not be able to get them to the safest place, but it would be good if we can locate land and at least get them off street parking.
Sure.
So it'd be harm reduction to some degree, and you can use sanitation trucks to come by, or you know, contract with someone that has sanitation trucks or something to get, you know, the waste out of the RVs once, or you know, a few times a week, and put up shower trailers in the same areas. Some of the things that could probably happen, you know, a lot quicker than trying to get an RV park, everything built out to properly, you know, facilitate those RVs. But just getting some land, or some land throughout the county, throughout the cities that are vacant, that could be used even temporarily, and get those RVs to park in those areas.
No, that's a really valid point, Pastor Willis, and actually links back to the policy update and that article that's in the agenda around how the county and city is working towards figuring out something related to RV encampments. So if we were to sort of focus our bridge building outreach on that population, if it all works out and they secure land to be able to park those RVs somewhere that has access to all of the resources that they need, then this could be a nice complement to that work. Princess, it looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's just a minor comment that I want to make. Sometimes, because I like to talk to some of the homeless people when I see them. Sometimes I cook for them too and send out visiting them in their locations.
Sure.
There's this couple with one little child that I see in front of 99-cent store a lot of time. They make jewelries. And I asked the lady, why are you here with your young child that is like about 3 years or 2? Do you know that they can give you preference in finding a boarding place for you? She said she preferred to live in her car. So I know that's a mental health issue. So how are we gonna involve the mental health professionals in dealing with them too, when a couple like that prefer to live in the car than when they have a place to stay?
Do you mean within the strategy, how will we involve mental health professionals?
So help them, because some of them they feel like they don't want to live in a place where they have people telling them what to do.
Sure.
So they prefer to live in the street, on the street, instead of living in.
And we also recognize that sometimes people have lost faith in the system, or they've had
That
their
part.
own negative experiences. And so there's an apprehension, you know, or that they feel like there have been false promises, or sometimes it takes a long time within the system to get holistic support. So as it goes with the bridge building strategy, as people are trained in the strategy, they will join existing outreach teams, and outreach teams normally consist of outreach workers of an organization, sometimes a physical health professional, and often a social worker and or mental health professional, to be able to support in that aspect, to make sure that if there are any mental health issues that the individual is willing to receive support on at that time, it's made available to them.
You know what, because I've known some people and I've worked with clients that have lived in their car, I just want to be us to be very careful and mindful about generalizing everything as a mental health issue. I
Right.
know very many people who have lived in their cars, and it was a very conscious decision to do that based on a number of factors. So we got to be careful about generalizing. It is not everybody, it doesn't have a mental health issue. It was the best scenario. The gentleman next door to me bought the house next door to me. He immediately turned the single family home into 4 units, and it's not even owner occupied. And he charged each one of these people $2,700 for a 1-bedroom, something that he managed to finagle.
Mhm.
So $2,700 is a lot of money. And if I got little kids, you know, some of the stories that we hear about the shelters and what have you are absolutely horror stories. So I know I can control my, at least that may be the last piece of control that I have. I know where my kids are, we safe, we're, you know, all of that. So they made a conscious decision to live in the house because we don't have $2,700 for a studio apartment. That's why they're living in their cars sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes that's people's is like like Carmen's mentioning, their best option while they're in process of getting services, because it takes time for the services to fully come to fruition. So I think this has been a really great conversation on targeted areas and some issues that we know are barriers that may arise as we implement our strategy. I would like us to kind of keep the target areas in the back of our mind. So Esme and I would love to revisit this at future meetings as well. But I think with that, we'd also like to focus on our days of dialogue timeline and implementation, because I'm sure that some things coming up in this conversation right now are going to also translate into days of dialogue. So I'm going to pass it to Dr. Orduña.
Hi, thank you, Rhea. Thank you, Estime. And thank you everyone for this evening. My name is Elisa Orduña, and have been a part of the Empowerment Congress, have worked in homeless services most of my career, and am excited to be now participating with Days of Dialogue. I heard so much around how do we make those connections to community? What do we do now while we're building out the bridge building outreach strategy? How do we begin engaging people today? And I think our Days of Dialogue, particularly tackling homelessness through collaboration series, which will launch kind of toward the end of September into the fall, will be that way. And so Pastor Lewis and of course, Pastor Willis, I already wrote your name and emails down, so I will be reaching out to you as well as others. So just want to give a quick update on where we are. So with that, it will be a series called Tackling Homelessness Through Collaboration. We're in the process of developing the dialogue guide. Then we'll be working with the facilitators. We have, I think, over 200 trained facilitators who will help lead this. And another part will be locations to have the data or have the dialogue. And anyone who has ever participated in a dialogue, it's a little bit different where it's open-ended. It's bringing people together through some guided questions around homelessness in their community, possibly their own experience with homelessness, ideas around solution, and just having a community conversation without an agenda. And the idea is to build trust and to build relationships. And I agree, Carmen, it seems like haven't we done this before, but I think there has been so much change with new staff, you know, the impact of our changing communities, everything with COVID is kind of up, you know, has really tossed things up. We have new leadership in various positions. So it's just a way to reset and rebuild those connections. Hopefully some were already never broken, so they'll be right there, and other new ones will able to bridge in. And with that, we have some specific, I just got to pull up the notes real quick. Dialogues coming up, we'll be doing one in partnership with KBLA with leaders on this topic of homelessness in August. We'll do our facilitators dialogue in September. And on September 30th, the Institute for Nonviolence Days of Dialogue will be hosting a fundraiser event to really kick off Facing Racism and Bigotry in Los Angeles and introducing Tackling Homelessness Through Collaboration to the community. So more information will to come on those events as well. With that, I'll turn it back over to our co-chairs, unless there are any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Orduña. Dr. Gonfer, I think we're ready to wrap up. Would you agree?
Yeah, this has been a very fruitful conversation. We appreciate everybody's attendance and participation. Our next meeting is going to be in 2 weeks. Same time, same Zoom link, August 24th, 6 p.m. I want to open it up to folks if they have any announcements before we adjourn. Okay, well, I wish you all a wonderful evening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.